Welcome to this public affairs talk show, and I'm VJ Roberts, and I am very excited today to have a special guest with us, Dr. Dolores Tarver. Hello, Dr. Tarver. I'm just so happy that you're here with us today, and talking about a very serious subject, though, about suicide prevention, because this is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And although the subject is very important to me, I just want to make it clear that all the research and some of the things that I've read, it says that maybe we can prevent a lot of them. So I'm so glad that Dr. Tarver is on with us. So let me just go ahead and say who you are. Dr. Dolores Tarver is a licensed psychologist and independent contractor at Columbus Psychological Associates. She uses her social media platform of Tea Time with Dr. Tarver to promote mental wellness. She specializes in mental health ministry, self-work, and skills building. Welcome, Dr. Tarver. I'm so
excited. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, and I know I love the fact that you give so much back to the community and all that you do. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So just tell us a little bit about suicide prevention awareness.
Absolutely. So as you stated, September is Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month. And I like to give people just kind of a general understanding of what it means when we talk about suicide. So between 2011 and 2021, we have seen some increases in suicide across all groups, but particularly we saw some suicide increases amongst our young people. And when we talk about suicide, suicide is what occurs when a person ends their life through various means. It could be hanging is very common for our young people, slitting wrists, taking medication in excessive amounts that ends up causing a person to either go into cardiac arrest or to slip away into a coma-like state in which they'll end up transitioning. By firearm is a means that is often utilized by men as a means to kill themselves. There's a difference between suicide and suicidal thoughts, or you'll hear people say suicidal ideation. Suicidal thoughts they could be very fleeting, very quick things, or they could be things that occur daily, such as, I wish I wasn't here. I wish I wasn't going through this pain. I wish the pain would end. I think the world would be better off without me. I don't know what my purpose is. There's no reason for me living. I don't want to live if I'm going to just exist like this. So I like to separate those out so people understand. One, I think I like to say to people, and I think this is uncomfortable for people, but it is a truth, which is, given the right set of circumstances, any one of us could experience suicidal thoughts. Because what feeds suicidal thoughts is hopelessness. And I think people think that, and I want to dispel the myth that suicide means that you're weak. Because that's not the case at all. Suicide means you're hopeless. And hopelessness can come in a variety of different ways. Hopelessness can look like alienation from people and not having support. Hopelessness can look like the inability to be able to manage difficulties in one's life because we just don't feel like we have the skills to be able to do it. Hopelessness can look like feeling abandoned by people, a lack of inspiration, powerlessness, oppression, doom, feeling like we're trapped or held captive, and just feeling helpless, that we're just powerless to be able to do anything about our situations, which is why any of us could potentially experience suicidal thoughts, and then puts us at higher risk to experience suicidal behaviors.
And I just want to say one thing, Dr. Tarver, when we were thinking about that, when we go to the doctor always asks us, have you thought about hurting yourself, as a wellness check? And most of us won't say, oh yeah, I did think about doing something. I did think, well, what's the use? Am I a burden to someone like that? So those are all thoughts that we have a lot even if we have great lives, we still have them.
Absolutely. And that I'm so glad you mentioned that, because suicide isn't just limited to people who are what we consider going through abuse or trauma, homelessness, financial burdens. We have seen an increase in people completing suicide who come from situations where it looks like they're doing fine. Their families are intact. They may be going along very successfully in their lives. We're also seeing suicide rates increase amongst our youngest little ones. So we're seeing suicide rates increase amongst our young babies that are under the age of 10. We're seeing the highest rates of suicide in young people between the ages of 10 to 24, but we have seen an increase in the young people between the ages of 5 to 11. So it doesn't mean that you have, because a lot of times suicidal thoughts are invisible wounds. We don't know what people are experiencing. We don't know what they're thinking. We don't know what has happened in their lives. We do know that there are a lot of triggers that could get us to that point. So for our young babies, divorces in their families, right? So parents splitting up can be a big trigger for them. We do know that abuse, witnessing violence, domestic violence, having a parent or a close family member that has a history of suicidal ideation or mental illness can be risk factors for our babies, but also for our young people when they feel like they don't have friendships, when maybe they've lost a friendship or there's been a breakup.
Being bullied.
Also, when they get in trouble at school, so being suspended, being expelled, having academic difficulties. For our little ones, ADHD and depression are some of the biggest triggers when we talk about mental illness that's underneath why they're completing suicide. So there's a lot of risk factors that we're not aware that people might be experiencing, because as you said, if we as adults go to the doctor and we're not honest about what we're experiencing, imagine our little ones who haven't really found their voices yet, have a lot of big emotions, but aren't sure how to express themselves, how they're trying to manage and navigate all of the really big things that they are experiencing, particularly since the pandemic, where we've seen that spike, because we saw a lot of young people at home and they fell behind. We saw a lot of families have more domestic violence when they were at home during the pandemic. So our young ones are still managing all of those things and trying to figure out how to navigate all of these situations that are difficult, again, for us adults to manage.
And I would like to just add that a lot of times when suicide is committed in a family, there might be others who go about committing suicide too. I don't know why it is like when we think about the famous writer Ernest Hemingway, to have that family history of suicide. So so it would be really behooving of us to try to stop the cycle of what we're seeing.
Absolutely. But we do know that's a risk factor. And so what we're talking to people, and there's so much shame around when people do complete suicide that families often don't want to discuss that. So then you don't know that you're at risk. And so I'd like to tell anybody that's listening, I want us to really work on not having shame, but talking to people about pain, talking to people about hopelessness, understanding that there is a human being underneath that was struggling with things that we may not have fully understood, but that doesn't mean that they weren't struggling to a level that they were in such pain, in such despair, in such depths and darkness that they didn't feel like that they could come out of. And we need to talk to our family members about that so we can be preventative, right? You mentioned this prevention piece, and I think that's very important. One of the biggest ways that we can be preventative, because there is, we know, a biological genetic component to suicide. We also know that there are environmental factors that are going to people completing suicide. So it behooves us to be able to talk about these things with our families. Here's your risk factors. We have mental illness in our family, particularly depression. We have substance abuse in our family. That's a big trigger for suicide, because some people will complete suicide. They weren't necessarily intending to die, but they were trying to numb the pain, and they were using substances to try to numb that pain, to just get some relief. And then they ended up overdosing, which is what led to them killing themselves. So we do need to talk about that. We need to understand the dynamics in our family. In the same way we want to know if we have a history of breast cancer, in the same way we want to know if we have a history of prostate cancer, we need to know if we have a history of mental illness, substance abuse, or suicide in our families, if we're going to be able to give people a chance to fight for their lives.
And I would add too that like some of the probable suicides are like people like Marilyn Monroe. They think that it was a probable suicide just based
Right.
on everything that she was going through. And then when you talk about high profile people who, and in fact, I didn't even know that country star Naomi Judd in April of 2022 passed away during because of suicide. You know, it wasn't her family really wanted to kind of keep it quiet about the notes that she left to say because they were really embarrassed about it. They wanted to keep it in their families. But when we think about it, when we share, we can really help someone else.
Absolutely. And I think it's important for us because a lot of people will say, well, Black people don't complete suicide. That's not true. We just lost Stephen, known as Twitch Boss, to suicide. We lost a beauty contestant and former beauty pageant winner, Chelsea Chris, to suicide. We have lost mayors. We have lost football players. We have lost writers. We have lost people who were popular on social media. We have lost entertainers. We have lost
Robin Williams.
musicians. Absolutely, right? Like, so it is not that it is simply people who are not Black that complete suicide. We have young Black people, young Black males in particular. We saw a significant increase in them completing suicide by hanging. And so we're talking about young people struggling, Black people struggling with suicide. So I don't want us to get comfortable and think it isn't in our communities, it isn't in our homes, because I imagine if we shake the limbs of the tree just a little bit, we'll find that there has been someone that we know of or someone that knows someone that has completed suicide. And so it's very important for us to have these conversations to normalize seeking help and getting support, to normalize that it's okay not to be okay. If you let me know you're not okay, I can support you. But if I don't create an environment where you can share you're not okay, then you're holding on to all of this pain. And we know that pain by yourself is a heavy burden. But if I can share that pain, it lightens the load.
And I just want to add that when somebody tells you how they feel, acknowledge it. Don't think,
Absolutely.
oh you're fine. You'll be just fine. You know, you're okay. There's nothing wrong with you. But when they tell you that they're in pain, really listen to them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for saying that, because I think, and here's one of the things I want to say to all of us as faith believers. You can have faith and still have suicidal thoughts. You having mental illness, you struggling, is not a reflection of a lack of faith. Neither is you seeking help when you are struggling. In fact, it is your faith that can allow you to seek that help and support, to know that God has helped by creating people who can assist you in your time of struggle. So I want us to get away as churches too of telling people just pray about it. I want you to pray and go and see somebody. I want
Right,
you to pray and take that medication.
right,
I
right.
want you to pray and go to that support group and call that crisis line.
Right, right. And I also want them to remember that Jesus faced everything that we will encounter here on earth. You know, Jesus was in the wilderness. He was hungry. He was tired. It's 40 days. And the devil is saying, oh, you know, if you're God, just throw yourself off this
Absolutely.
mountain. That's another form of committing suicide. But he was strong enough to say, get thee behind me, Satan. And that
Absolutely.
and I just want to I know you're going to get to some personal factors that protect against suicide risk, but I just want to remind you that you know, is that power of that prayer and talking to someone when you feel like this is just so important. And I'm sorry to keep interrupting you, but that is
No,
it.
you're doing this
Yeah.
to be a conversation, not a lecture. But these are things that people, as you said, Jesus cried out, "Why hast thou forsaken me?" Right? And so we have discussed that that's a risk factor for suicide. So absolutely, to be bullied, as you said, to be talked about, to be judged, to be crucified, right? So we've experienced these things, and these are triggers for why we feel suicidal. And yes, so let's do a little bit of shifting. So we've kind of talked about some of the things that are triggers for us. And I do want to, particularly for people that have young folks, because I know sometimes when we have young people, they're moody and we don't recognize any changes in their behavior because we think that's how they are. Talk to your babies. Ask
Yes.
them questions. Don't just assume that because they're moody and they go to their rooms a lot and they play on their games a lot, that they don't have things going on. Our young people are dealing with a lot of different things. And it is when we ask people the right questions that we can absolutely get to those things that they are struggling with. So yes, let's shift. So I want to talk
But
about, go
and
ahead.
since
Go
you
ahead,
said
EJ.
that, what's the question that you should what are some of the questions you should ask, when they want to go to their rooms? And you're absolutely right.
Mhm.
They get in their rooms and they shut the door. So
Absolutely.
so what do we
Absolutely.
do?
I want to back up to one thing that you said earlier, which is believe them. So first of all, if anyone makes a statement, any child makes a statement, and I know that sometimes we use things loosely, but you want to follow up. I wish I could just die. I hate it here, right? So those kind of things, follow up, ask questions. Hey, baby, when you say you wish you could die, are you thinking about harming yourself? Do you have difficulty finding things that you enjoy? Like, does life feel really hard right now for you? Um, what's going on at school? Are people being nice to you? Have you made friends? Do you feel like you're by yourself a lot? Are you eating lunch by yourself? Are you eating lunch with people? When you're in your classroom, are people talking to you or people talking about you? Right? So asking some of these questions, there are a lot of ways that you can ask questions. If you get a roadblock one way, shift and ask it a different way. Tell me about something good that happened today. And if they say, well, nothing ever happens good to me, that's giving you insight right there that they're struggling. Right? For people who are giving away things, well, I don't want that anymore. You can have it. I don't need it. Okay, baby, that was your favorite. Why are you
Mm,
giving that away?
mm, mm. That's so and that's one of the signs. Yeah,
That is one of the signs.
when it's like they're saying goodbye. They're saying goodbye
Absolutely.
to things.
Absolutely. I want to go see grandma because I don't know that I'll see grandma again. Well, why are you saying you won't see grandma again, baby?
Mm,
What's going on that you don't think you'll see grandma? Are you
wow.
worried about grandma or are you worried about you?
Mm, that's great. That's great.
Yeah. So we it's just important for us to, and I think the other thing too, and this is, talking about the preventative factors, one of the most preventative factors there is to take your children to see a therapist, to get them in with a good counselor, someone who can, when you start hearing those things, because I know when we hear those things, we get scared and we feel overwhelmed. And our first thoughts are, I don't know what to do, right? You don't have to know everything to do by yourself. Seek that support. And I tell people, know your resources ahead of time. Every family should have a list of crisis resources, as well as a list of counselors who accept their insurance, or if you don't have insurance, places that will see you without insurance. You need to know that ahead of time. So when it happens that you need to see somebody, you don't have to scramble around trying to find resources, because that can be very detrimental when somebody is in crisis mode and I don't even know where to take you. So now I'm delayed 5 months trying to find somebody for you. So everybody should have a list of resources readily available to them for them to use. And I will also say to people, it is very important to support, connect, right? So for people that feel hopeless, it is important for them to learn skills to be able to see beyond this situation. Most situations have a solution, but we don't know what the solution is. If I'm in that place of helplessness, hopelessness, and I haven't learned skills, I don't have distress tolerance. A lot of people have difficulty dealing with what they perceive as rejection. So
Mhm.
first, I got to teach you that rejection doesn't mean that you're not loved and worthy. You being broken up with and not with this person doesn't mean you're unworthy. Your worth isn't dictated by your wallet. So though you're having financial difficulty right now, that doesn't mean that you don't have any value. we can figure out some ways to problem solve, but I need to make sure you have support resources. You have stable housing, you have food, you have people around you, your family going through a divorce. Maybe you need to be in some family counseling to be able to address this, because oftentimes we will internalize that it's our fault when there's a divorce as children. But also, I may be a spouse. So this is for our older people too, who may feel like this was the love of my life. I can't even see myself without this person. How am I going to function without them? So I need to be able to be in therapy to learn skills to be able to manage that. That's one of the most preventative resources. We call it resiliency. So
Yes,
when I am able to get through a problem, to find ways to cope and manage it, to improve my problem solving, that is one of the greatest ways that we can prevent people from considering suicide, when we give them skills to be able to deal with painful events.
very good. Very good. And then what about relationships? Because that's so important. Like you just talked about, are they eating lunch by themselves? Older people who, especially with COVID, who didn't want to go out of their houses because they were afraid of getting COVID. And people who stopped going to church because of COVID, and they missed that connection.
Absolutely. So when we talk about the factors that influence that hopelessness, attachment is top on the list. Attachment, mastery. So the mastery is the skill piece that I was just talking about. But that attachment is really, really important, because all of us wants to belong. We want to be accepted. We want to have connections. And even the most ornery person who says that they don't like people does not like to be alone, because when we're alone with our thoughts. And as my mother used to say, when you think alone, you think wrong. So the more you are thinking and you're the only person giving you information, that is when in the deep darkness of the night, your mind can go to those places of, why am I here? I'm by myself. I don't have anybody. The world wouldn't be any different without me. Nobody's going to miss me. Nobody's around. So it is very important for us to be able to connect. Check on those people that are by themselves. We have older people that live by themselves. They may no longer be able to drive, and so they're unable to get out. A phone call can make all the difference.
Yes.
You can video with people now on phones, and so you can see people. You can drop by, put them a care package together, drop by and surprise them. Come pick them up, take them to church. We have ministries that have transportation available to be able to go and get them. Come invite them to dinner at your house. Go get them, pick them up. You don't have to bring anything. You're the treat. You're the dessert. So come on over. We just want to fellowship with you. That's not only good for them, but it's good for us too, because one of the other things that helps us is when we feel like we're doing something with meaning and purpose. So us being able to pour into other people makes us feel good too, because what is it doing? It's giving me a sense of value.
Yes, yes, yes. That's great.
Absolutely. So our kids too. And sometimes you have to, this is why it's important for us to know about community resources. Every kid isn't going to be a kid that does sports. And so I don't want it always to be put your kids in soccer, put your kids in basketball. If they're sports inclined, that is wonderful. But there are a lot of other ways that they can connect to. They may be into robotics. They may be into art. They might be into poetry. They might be into singing. They might be into acting. There are a lot of different things, but find their talent. Every kid has a talent. And sometimes they don't know what it is because it just hasn't been nurtured.
Right.
And so
Right.
as we're talking with them and seeing what they're leaning toward and what are they spending a lot of time doing and what do they light up when they see it, nurture
Mhm.
that. And through
Yeah,
those activities, they can build a community. We all need a tribe.
that's right. That is so good. And one of the things that I really love to do is that I love to go for a walk. Just go for a walk. Take the dog, go for a walk. I'm going to see my neighbors. I see all my neighbors. I get to talk to them. Um, you know, and when COVID hit, we were all in the streets. Even my husband would go and my daughter would go. We would be all together, like, and
Mm-hmm.
traveling, and so that's one of the things I miss about community, and especially for African Americans, it was a community. It was in the household. You'd have the grandmother and the mother and the children. So if the mother wasn't available because she's working, there was the grandmother there. And that made a huge difference.
Because you always had a connection. But I will also say to people There is biological family and there is chosen family.
Yes.
So if you don't have the people in your life who are loving in those ways that are in your biological family, do know that you can choose other people to become a part of your family. You can create your tribe, and you can create that tribe through church. You can create that tribe through your community organizations that you're a part of. You can create that tribe through art, your art networks, walking. You meet a lot of people when you go walking. So there's a lot of different ways we can make connections with coworkers, with people that we went to school with. And so I don't want people to think that you're only limited to your family members, because if your family members are a source of conflict and stress, because relational issues is one of the biggest triggers for suicide. And so if you are finding that you feel worse when you're talking to people that are your biological family members or who say they're your friends, do know that you don't have to stay there, because that feeling trapped is what helps us feel that helplessness and that hopelessness. Know that you can create a support system that is loving and kind to you.
I love that. I love that. And that is so.
Yes, ma'am. So, and you mentioned the walking. I think is so very important that we know that coping looks a lot of different ways. That is walking, that might be meditation, that might be prayer, mindfulness, that might be singing, that might be water therapy, that might be artwork. Like there are so many different ways that, and all of these things allow us to be able to deal with stress, allow us to be able to quiet those thoughts that sometimes can be very self-destructive. And so the more coping resources you have, the more you'll be able to deal with the challenges that you're going to experience in your life. And so I tell people there's never such a thing as too many coping mechanisms. Keep adding, keep growing. There are so many things that we think, well, Black people don't do that. Yes, we do. We do all of that. And we do it very well if we'll allow ourselves an opportunity to be able to grow in it in practice.
And I will tell you that at Fort Moore, they have it's suicide has been very hard on our servicemen. And although we don't talk about it very much, we don't see it. I know years ago I had one of my cast members who was Black, and her father committed suicide at Fort at the time was Fort Benning. And I didn't know how to. I really didn't know how to respond to that. But I wanted to say before we start to close, I know that CDC has a lot of information about suicide where people can get it, and they have a call or text 988 or chat at 988lifeline.org. Are there other resources that you wanted to recommend?
Absolutely. And I want people to know that's free.
Mhm.
The National Institute of Mental Health has resources. You also have the American Psychological Association has resources. You have a lot of resources for therapy here. Columbus Psychological Associates, Pastoral Institute, Ellie Mental Health. So there are a lot of different places where a person can go and get information, a person can get therapy. There are free resources that people can utilize as well. There's a family counseling center here. So if you're having family challenges and you want some assistance with that, you have NAMI that's here, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, that does support groups. Pastoral Institute has grief groups. I know grief can be a trigger for suicide. We do know that our active duty 22 a day are completing suicide. And so there are particular interventions at the VA for people. If you're a veteran, if you're active duty, you can be seen on post, but you also can get referrals to be seen in the community. So there are a lot of different resources that are available to people.
Well, Dr. Tarver, are there any last words that you wanted to say? Because I think our time is really just about up.
Absolutely. I will say this to anyone that is listening: you always matter.
Mm, that's so powerful. When I was a kid, my mother, and I don't know why she said this. I don't know what I was exhibiting or showing, but she said to me, and she called me Nessa, and they called me Nest Egg, and she said that if you ever feel like you don't want your life, then come and bring it to me, because I always want your life. Uh, and that was just such unconditional love that she gave to me. So no matter what, I felt like I could tell her anything. I felt like I was important to her. And I want to say to our audience that um, you are that important to Jesus, that he loves you that much, that you can always come to him no matter what the situation. There is no condemnation. There's nothing too bad that you can't tell him about. And I say that with all due respect that this happens all over our country. So let's just start loving each other and respecting people for who they are. So
Amen.
so thank you so much for being with us. We love you and we are appreciative, and once again I just say thank you. You are a right on time sister, and I just thank you so much for it.
I
And thank you.
appreciate you so much.